Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are concluding our 35th season, I interview writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished, what they're planning for the future. We do have a wide net, and we have had on other brands of artists, people who are painters, people who are actors, people who are sculptors. So if you have an idea for an artist who might be appropriate for the writer's block, even if it's a different genre of artist, please watch for our address at the end of the show. We'd be glad to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that the writer's block and all the other original programming out of 1623 studios is a result of cable access television. It's not a service you get by going to Dish or other means of accessing the internet. So stick with cable, stick with the writer's block. I'm happy to say this evening we do have a person very much concerned with writing and the words of all history. He is Trenton Carls, the head librarian and archivist at Cape Ann Museum. And he's going to talk to us about preserving words and preserving heritage. Trenton Carls, welcome to the Writer's Block.
Thank you, John, very much for having me. Congratulations on your 35th season coming to a conclusion and the Emerald anniversary. I found the closest thing to Emerald I could, so congratulations on that big
Emerald
milestone.
anniversary,
Yes.
Tell me something about your background and where you're from and how you got to Gloucester.
Sure. So I'm from Illinois, a place familiar to you, I believe. Central Illinois, to be specific.
Whereabouts?
Jacksonville is where I was born and raised, and I went to school in a small town called Concord. Concord. I think out here you say Concord, but over there in the Midwest we say Concord.
Named after the Concord, Massachusetts?
Probably. I had a high school graduating class of 34 people, very small rural community, beautiful place. And then when I graduated high school and turned 18, I immediately went to Chicago. And so Chicago had always kind of been my passion.
The big city.
The big city. I took a trip there when I was younger, and it kind of stuck ever since. So.
Where from Springfield is the small town that you grew up in?
Due west. So about half hour, 45 minutes straight west of Springfield. So grew up, very familiar with Abraham Lincoln, all the field trips.
Spoon River?
Yes, absolutely, Spoon River. Yep, so all of that fun stuff. And then, like I said, when I turned 18 and graduated high school, I moved up to Chicago and started school at University of Illinois, Chicago. Absolutely loved my time in the city, and so much so that I eventually ended up going back to get my master's degree in library and information sciences.
So you went to U of I, Chicago?
Yes, and then
one of my alma maters.
Yes.
And how long were you in Chicago?
Grand total over a decade. I bounced around a little bit. I went out to Western Illinois for the rest of my undergrad, where I graduated, so near Macomb, Illinois, or in Macomb, Illinois, and then bounced back up to Chicago, which is where I was until I came to Gloucester.
Chicago's a wonderful city. I've lived in Chicago as well.
It is. I'm really lucky to have kind of had my formal training in librarianship there. There was a lot of great opportunities for volunteer and internships that kind of put me on the right path. One of my most fond one was my early exposure to Studs Terkel and his radio archive. And so I got to work on creating metadata for those digitized tapes. So
Studs Terkel's a big name out there.
He is. I actually, later in my career, when I was working at the Chicago History Museum, I was fortunate enough to have his old office, which was quite nice. And yeah, I didn't have the futon.
Kind of a magical aura there?
Exactly. Yeah, I think I absorbed a few things.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, Chicago to Massachusetts and Gloucester is a migration I made a long time ago. How did you make that same switch?
Well, I drove the 1,000 miles out here now.
Well, I've done that often.
It's a fun drive. I did it in one day once, but usually you have to break it up. So I met a girl, and we were working together at the Chicago History Museum, and she was a curator there, and she got a job at the Peabody Essex Museum. And so that brought us out here, and I started my New England career at the New England Historic Genealogical Society. So I was working there as their metadata and cataloging librarian for about a year or so, and then the position at the Cape Ann Museum opened up, and I really felt that was kind of the exact type of experience I wanted. You're doing a little bit of everything. You're having a lot of interaction with researchers and the community, and it felt like the right fit. So
your partner got a job at PBS, and then you decided,
I'm going
to stick with you.
Yeah.
She grew up in the East?
No. She's from Indiana.
Oh.
So she was raised in Indiana. Ended up coming to Chicago as well. Our paths crossed, and fate brought us out here.
And when did you arrive at the KPM Museum?
November 12th, 2019.
2019, just
Yes.
in time for
just
COVID
in time for the
shutdown.
pandemic. And it was obviously a lot of terrible things came out of that pandemic. But for me, I was 4 months into the job from Illinois. I knew very little about this part of the world, and the one thing that I found during those first 4 months was how knowledgeable and experienced all of the people that were coming in to ask me questions were about the questions they were asking me. I remember one very early interaction where somebody asked me what I had on the Folly Cove designers. I didn't know what Folly Cove was, much less the designers. And so having that break during the pandemic allowed me to take a beat instead of being public facing and front facing, and have that moment to learn about the collection, learn about the region, and kind of go back in better informed and stronger in the role.
You used the time well.
Yes,
I
very
think
much so.
I learned real early in Gloucester to watch my words, because the person I was speaking to was going to be the
Yes.
wife's second cousin of the
Yes.
brother-in-law of the person
Yes.
I was referring to.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Assume nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are the head librarian at a museum. I think of librarians being in libraries. What does a head librarian at a not a major but an important regional museum do?
We do a lot, and there are all forms of librarians. My path when I was in grad school, I thought was going to take me to academia. I thought I was going to be a librarian in a university. I had some part-time jobs in that as I was kind of going through that path, and I really thought that's where I was going to be. But during my program, I was lucky enough to get a volunteer position at the Chicago History Museum, and I found from that moment that the interaction of the material and the way in which you're sharing it was so much more engaging and exciting. You could see kind of that immediate impact that materials were having. You were putting them on display through exhibitions. You were working with researchers one-on-one. And so that's kind of where I continued to develop my career. At the Cape Ann Museum, we have a beautiful museum and a beautiful experience for our visitors. Part of the greatness of the way in which the museum operates is it blends art, history, and culture. Those are our historic taglines. And so people can come in to a gallery and they can see a painting, but they can also see right next to it a letter that describes this painting to the person that perhaps it was being sold to or painted for. So that type of interaction in the gallery is very neat. But in the library and archive space in which we welcome visitors, people have that chance to see something in the galleries that will further spark their curiosity so that they can walk downstairs and then immediately learn more about that topic. So it's kind of multi-tiered engagement.
Yeah. But the way you describe it sounds like kind of a linguistic archaeology at times.
Absolutely.
And exposing that history to a wider public.
Yeah, and we have great visitorship down there. It's a mix of people who know we're there and intentionally come and want to look at something specific versus people who are just curious and they want to find out more. They maybe didn't know that we were down there, but just enjoy that ability to so easily access materials. Museums are different. Everyone has a different criteria for how they allow people to view things, but we really prioritize, helping people as fast as we can.
So do your roles as librarian and archivist sort of mesh and overlap and are essentially often difficult to distinguish?
It's a great question. I think that there's such different types of careers. I mean, a librarian naturally is meant to be, getting books to people, sharing things, creating that type of, high interaction. An archivist role is more about the preservation and the safekeeping of documents, the organization of documents. And so I may be a little bit, blending and crossing my wires by saying, oh yeah, we can get you this archive just as easily as we could a book. So it is interesting the way in which that works, but it all bleeds together. Particularly at a community archive like this, in which so much of the history is intertwined. As we were just saying, we don't know who we're talking to, if they're the ex of the whomever. But so much of that history is connected, and it really enhances the researcher's work by being able to see the book, the photograph, the archives, all in one spot.
So you sound very enthusiastic, and it sounds like the different searches or excavations are exciting. And
I mean, you learn something new every day. There's not been a moment on the job where I've been bored, because I'm learning some aspect of history, some aspect of the community, some different time period in which something important was happening here. And that expands across all archives. Is that the job is to learn. You're never a master in anything, but you know a little bit of everything.
Yes.
So that's an interesting part.
One of the materials, or the collections of materials that Cape Ann Museum has agreed to archive happens to be the writer's block record.
Interesting.
The writer's block ending with this show. It's 35th year, not ending the series, but ending the 35th year.
Moment, yeah.
And I wonder when that will be taking place.
Simultaneously as we speak. I actually have a DVD running back at the office right now of some of those conversions happening. So, kind of to share the news out, I think that John has graciously agreed to pass on these great tapes to the Cape Ann Museum. Dating back to 1990, various formats from cassette reels, VHS, to CDs, to some thumb drives, which are very helpful.
Talk about archaeology.
It very much has
been.
It's the
Middle Ages.
We have a few converters that help out with some of that stuff, but
we used to record on 3/4-inch tape.
Glad we don't still.
I'm very pleased that these materials can move from the spider-infested floor where they've been residing, and reside at Cape Ann Museum.
I agree.
Now,
go ahead.
No, I know that Cape Ann Museum has agreed to that,
yes.
And I wonder if you have any questions for me.
Well, funny you should ask that, John. I was thinking about that, and I was wondering if we could actually switch seats. I'm not sure if that's sacrilegious, but I have some questions for you, and I would love to interview you. Shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. Flawless. Beautiful.
Ooh. Well, now I'm nervous.
I was going to say, you should be. I've got a whole list of questions.
I've never been on TV before.
Is that the hot seat, or is this the hot seat? Both are the hot seat.
Depends on how the conversation goes.
So, John, you have been in this seat for a long time, 35 seasons to be exact. How many people have you interviewed?
There's been 438 shows, and many of those shows have had multiple people. So my guess is, without adding them all up, about 700 guests.
Okay, that's not bad. I think that one of the questions you ask people, and one of the ones that you asked me, is who are you and how did you get here? So John Ronan, who are you and how did you get here in about a minute and a half?
Well, I grew up in St. Charles, Illinois, a little town about 40 miles west of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to school in Chicago and lived in Chicago for a time. And then I got a job at North Shore Community College and moved. That's a little shortened version.
Longer,
but
yeah.
I won't include all the parties and the girlfriends and the different episodes. I moved to Gloucester because of the job. Mm-hmm. The first apartment I looked at because of that job was in the Magnolia section of Gloucester, and I immediately fell in love with this city. I'm still in love with this city. It's a wonderful place, and I'm never going anywhere else. And that's it. And I started the show because I was in an interview in Albany, New York, on a talk show that featured writers, and I came back home and I asked the director of 1623 Studios,
Mm-hmm.
the Cape Ann TV then, if I could do a show.
Well.
And her name was Sinica Nagello, a wonderful, wonderful woman. She didn't let me finish my sentence. She said, "When do you want to start?"
Yeah.
So
That's great.
I've been doing it since.
And that first episode I've recently watched, and it's kind of funny. You jump right in. You go in front of the camera and you say, "My name is John Ronan. I'm your host, and here we go." Your intro hasn't changed much since that first episode. Though I was remorsed to see that the pixelated computer screen that originally said writer's block, I think it's an old Apple of some form, is now upgraded.
Yeah.
But you say the line in that first season, "We hope to have a good time." Can you recount the entire intro that you had at that point?
No.
Because it hasn't changed much, but
No,
there
it
are
hasn't
some.
changed too much. But one of the things that really helped me, I worked with a woman by the name of Stig Muxness, and she said to start out, you have to have a script.
Right.
And I said, script? I was very naive. I'm just going to ask questions. Then you got to have an intro. You got to have in mind what kind of questions, what general sorts of questions, no matter what type of guest you have. And she was very, very helpful.
Yeah, great. So when you started this series back in 1990, two-part question: did you have any background in television or production at all, or was this something outside of the episode that you had attended? Is this a brand new venture?
Some.
Yeah.
I've been teaching a little bit at Illinois State, and I would take students over to the TV facility, and we would go through sections of a play. And other exercises just to get them more technically involved with the material. So some, but not too much.
So when you had that first season and you came in and you talked to Sinica and you were saying, "All right, here we go, first season," did you have any hopes, dreams, expectations? Did you imagine yourself sitting here 35 years later?
I couldn't imagine myself 5 years older than I was. No, at the time, cable was very hot. People were coming in as I came in and said, "Can we do a show?" Sinica said, "Sure." And people would do a show for a year or two, drop out, 5 years and drop out. I did 5 years, and then a friend of mine had a party. And then I thought, he's like, "Stop the show now." And then pretty soon, it was 10 years, and there was a bigger party, and
So you're in it for the parties, is what you're saying.
I was in for the rest. So it was always fun.
Yeah.
It continues to be fun. So that's how I went from trying out to legacy conscious.
Right. Good. Okay. Well, that's later on question.
Yeah.
But you spoke to it that it's still fun, and I was curious after 35 years and some repeat guests. What excites you about the process? What gets you out of bed in the morning and saying, "I'm excited to do this"? And how are you continuing to motivated to find new guests?
I care about writing centrally, art in general, and people come to me and they say, "I'm doing this novel or I'm doing this book of poetry. Can I be on your show?" And I do everything to get them on because the emphasis on local people, local talent, and these people don't have Houghton Mifflin behind them.
Sure.
They don't have $1 million PR assistants. This is their publicity, and they're very happy to be on. And I get thrilled when they're thrilled. And there's so many creative people constantly coming into Gloucester, many staying, and there's many people in Gloucester who have not coming in recently. They've been here and they're doing new work, and it's really a joy to find people doing that and see their excitement. I feed off their excitement. They'll say, "You got to read this. You got to read this."
Well, and that's something I've seen so much of from Cape Ann, across the board, is that there's so much talent and creativity here that it's kind of an endless pot of individuals that you can have showcasing something that they're doing.
Yes, it is, and it continues to be, and I expect it will continue to be.
Good. So I have the great fortune of having a very comfortable guest with me today here in John Ronan. But we talked a little bit about Stud's Circle earlier, kind of this idea of the interview, the questioning. How have you over the 35 years honed your interviewing skills? How do you take a guest who maybe is uncomfortable and maybe a little bit nervous, put them at ease? Looking through some of these tapes that you've already passed along, I am skimming parts of it, and the very beginning, the person's there kind of a little bit nervous, a little bit twitching, probably exactly like I was. But by the end of it, you're seeing them comfortable, relaxed, and smiling. What's your process, and how do you ease into that?
I often make a joke saying, "This is local TV. If you don't make a mistake, we have to go back and put one in."
Yeah.
And then they kind of discover from that joke, or maybe a couple others, that this isn't CBS, not NBC. Right. You can be relaxed. I tell them always, wear whatever you're comfortable wearing.
Mm-hmm. I didn't get that message.
Our green room is closed. Our makeup artist is off.
Cue card guy's gone.
So you just talk to them casually. And some people are nervous. Some potential guests have said they'd like to be in, and they refuse to be on. They're so nervous. So that seems to work. I've learned, as teachers and interviewers learn, never to ask a yes or no question. Right. Always explain or describe something that needs a narrative answer. Right. And that helps. And of course, talking to people about their creations is like, it's like talking about their kids. You tell me about your children. Whoa, we're off and running, and which is joy. And I've had many people say I'm a good interviewer, and I'm not a good interviewer. I'm an okay interviewer. You talk to people about what gives them joy, that creativity, and they're very happy to share that with you.
Go forth. Yeah, that's great. Well, with that, do you recall, this may be a tough one, but do you recall an interview that kind of changed your way of thinking or changed your approach, or was there something kind of early on that really cemented the way in which you wanted to go forward? Or even a very impactful interview, somebody impactful, somebody who really kind of said, okay, this is some good stuff.
Well, I think that the first show that inspired me to ask Seneca, the interview show I did in Albany, I picked up on what they did. They were doing very much ahead of us, very much what I do now. So that happened. Also, I had, I think early on, I had a guest who had me as an interviewer. I hadn't learned the lesson about yes and no questions yet. So I would ask a question, how long did it take to write this book?
2 days.
Long time. And that's it. I'm waiting, nothing. So I think by the end of that show, I was asking if he liked cats or something,
No.
No, right. So I can't remember, that first interview when I was interviewed in Albany, and maybe one or two early guests who were very, very nervous because this was new, much newer 35 years ago. And people aren't nervous much anymore by this. But a couple of guests like that really made me think about my style of question.
All right, we have a few minutes left on the program this evening, so thank you for joining us, John. A couple softball questions.
Yes, sir.
Maybe not. Who do you wish you would have interviewed? It can be a Cape Ann, it can be anywhere, it can be Abe Lincoln with our Illinois ties.
When he was working here on The Perfect Storm, I was oblivious to the fact that I could have gotten him on the show. And now I'm blanking on his name.
Are we talking the author or the director?
Yes, so the author of Perfect Storm.
Younger,
of course. Yeah. I'm embarrassed.
Yeah, no, it's all right. We won't show him this.
I could have had him on the show. And that slipped through my fingers.
Off Cape Ann?
No, who?
Off Cape Ann?
Off Cape Ann. Well, You said Lincoln?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't get
we'd
it.
say
Didn't have
Lincoln.
a
You didn't
chance
get
to-
him? All right.
As old as I am, I did not
Wow.
have a chance to interview Lincoln.
Lincoln still may be impossible,
I think-
but younger does still come around.
Younger, yeah.
You know, and he may be here for season 36. Maybe we can get him on for 36. He comes around still.
36?
Yeah, why not? If you were interviewing yourself, so if you were me and you were you, what questions would you ask you that I, of course, haven't asked yet?
I'd ask a question that would maybe help me with my own writing. Where do you get your ideas for poetry? What prompts work for you? What prompt you?
Right.
Something like that, because I'm always looking for new ideas in my own work. I would ask questions that might help me.
Does this place inspire you in your writing?
Is the place?
This part of the world,
Oh.
Gloucester?
Place, yes, very much.
Usually.
Place is important. Place is sacred, you know, and I think this is very serious earth here, and serious seas and ocean, and it's you can feel it, and if you can't feel it, you can imagine it, and that's the same thing.
Okay, 2 quick questions. These tapes, this program, will now be held in perpetuity at the Cape Ann Museum. How do you view this program being used in the future, and what will its legacy be?
Holy smokes.
We don't have enough time for that answer, do we?
Well, thank you. Let me
Yes.
think about
Yeah,
that.
for next season
year.
we'll respond.
Now, I'm
Excellent.
going to take control here.
You got it. I'll pass it back to you.
Control of the show again. We switched here, and that was fun. Trenton interviewed me, and I don't know what camera I'm there. I'm on that camera. Trenton interviewed me for 15 minutes, and it was fun. I hope you have enjoyed both the first half and the second half. I want to say a special thanks to Trenton and a special thanks to our TV audience for being with us all this season. This is the last show of the 35th season, so I won't say see you next week. I'll say see you next season. Thanks for being with us on the Writer's Block. Good night.